Welcome to the EQ for Life podcast. EQ for Life is a podcast based on your views as a parent, a companion, an entrepreneur, or business leader, and how learning to be smart about emotions plays out in everyday life. And here's our host, a practitioner and teacher of emotional intelligence, Parrish Owen Taylor.
We haven't even talked about safety critical tasks. Talking about workflow and efficiency.
Yeah. Look at, Chick-fil-A and their takeout lane,
Up.
There's nothing safety critical within a lot of that. I mean, there is some, they're wearing vests, they got that, but I mean, the whole process is make the client happy, multiple contacts with my client along the way to make it smooth and go well, and as seamless as we can make it. And, does that mean we had to put more employees out there instead of one person on a mic in a window? That's exactly what it was. So we ended up putting 3-4 more people per lane out there. But go to McDonald's, go to someplace where you can park and look at a McDonald's, a Burger King, and a Chick-fil-A. And look at the lines at lunchtime.
Or Canes. Same thing. See,
Yeah.
what we're talking about here, Tim, just for clarity, if anybody's listening, is if you're an executive leader within an organization, you are constantly looking at that leg called our SOPs and how we do things here. And you're constantly talking to, correct me if I'm wrong, the people that are doing the work.
As to whether
they're going
effective.
to create that feedback. Now, again, you're going to get some stupid crap, but if it's done right, the top can connect with those that are doing this work. And we're in a constant refinement of the SOP to a point where, we rationalize the additional costs on 3 lanes and 3 new servers because look what we're doing. We increase volume, we increase workflow and profitability. This is human performance.
Right. Well, the same thing we were hitting stationary objects. That's one of our biggest problems with the vehicles. Vehicle accidents where it's one vehicle and a stationary object. And that just, you sit in a room and that baffles your mind. What are these guys doing? They keep hitting dumpsters and mailboxes, garbage, So one of the things one of the guys saw that Bell South had a little magnet on their door and it said, I walked at 360. So what they do is the magnet's on the outside of the door. They got to walk all the way around to 360, come back, take the magnet off and throw it on the inside. That way they've walked around the car. They know what's going, because so many times guys nose up to a garbage can, nose up to a mailbox. I can't see it from the cab. When I tell myself I'm going to remember that, I won't forget. But when I get in the truck, I drive off and I run over a garbage can. I run over the mailbox. So simply making them walk a 360. Within no time, when our safety committee, it was a safety committee policy. Safety committee came up with the idea. They saw it someplace else, wanted to bring it over to us. And within 6 months, you could go to the mall and you would see minivans backed in with one of our magnets on the door. Because it was so good common sense that it drifted not just from the workplace, but to the house.
I love it.
How many of us at our age have either somebody or acquaintance of somebody, or it's a family member that has backed over a pet or, God fear, a child, right? And the second everybody realizes that, and you start realizing the blind spot behind that minivan and all that kind of stuff. If it's a good safety rule and it's a good policy and procedure, when you come to the audit process, that you've got to do that audit. If you don't do the audit, you're wasting time.
Right.
And then you see how effective it is. You see how it's doing so well. You see that guys have carried it home, but then you get a guy who's not doing it. And he's like, F you, I've been pulling this vehicle in for 38 years and that's fine. I don't need to do that. That's stupid. Okay, well, now I got a behavior, I'm sorry you don't see it my way. We're going to have a discussion about it. And this is the company policy. And we are expecting you, the expectation, clear expectations. That's part of that respect conversation. You are nailing down the clear expectations in that conversation. And then from there, you just start marching him along, and he has to make the choice. Is my bullheadedness worth my job? Is my bullheadedness worth 8 hours of pay, 16 hours of pay, 24 hours of pay? You know, so,
When
you'd
you
be,
go to when you go to the Human Performance Handbook, it's from the DOE. There's 19 behaviors, and one of those behaviors is adhering to procedure adherence.
Mhm.
So again, we know it's there. We could have the best policy, but yet if you have a human being that cannot be emotionally intelligent to adhere to the policy, which is there to serve everybody, then you get the retribution, you get all the emotional discord, workflow gets hindered. I'm thinking about a lot of things, and we're going to have to do this again. You and I met at the turn of the century. You're military, you're a Christian, you're a father, a grandfather, you're invested now as an entrepreneur in the electric utility space. Give a high level of Tim Self.
Okay. Well, I started, hello, my name's Tim Self. I started in this industry back in the 80s. My father had been a lineman with Florida Power and Light, and when he had left and gone into full-time ministry, and when I got of age, I went to work for the power company myself down there in Miami in the early 80s. And I progressed from there, traveled around the country, worked for different contractors, different IOUs. I ended up with Florida Power in the Orlando area back in the early 2000s. I was a trainer and a training manager before that with a contractor in the country. But I went back to my tools thinking that I would just go to work for a year and then, make a supervisor's job. But the money was so good, I stayed in my tools for 5 years. Then went into supervision and management at the IOU as a resource foreman or resource utilization coordinator, as they changed the term over the time I was in it. But then I went through a divorce back in 2009, and old colleague came over to me and asked me if I'd be a part with him and his company and designing a curriculum and consulting and delivering that curriculum. And I stepped off in 2010 into my consultant space and been doing that ever since. I have been executive director of training at one of the largest line colleges in the country. I'm a dad, a grandpa, born again Christian, a journeyman lineman, and I love what I do. I love traveling all around the world. It's a great job. Been a CUSP for 13 years now. It's all been a great space. You leave your tools, your tradesman, and you have all your training. You always identify as the tradesman that you came up as a lineman. But I would say the last, as much as half of my career has been in either training, safety, training management, supervision, management, and the operations side. So as you grow into your space and what you're going to do, I have a neat perspective and the ability to understand both the contracting world and the industrial utility world, the non-union contracting world versus the union contracting world. I have a good grip on all of that. And that's what makes me a value add to my clients.
Fantastic. And again, you summarized it so well, the unique experience of being on both sides of the house, the contractor and the IOU. And then again, the unique animal dealing with the union workforce and the open shops. I mean, that just speaks volume. You've got some current work going on right now. Did I understand you right? Are you helping our friends that got hit with the fire and the Hurricane Idalia over there?
Well, most of my client base, I have a base of clients that have been with me the whole 13 years. And I come in and I might do their annual training for them, as well as safety consulting and performance consulting. for them as well. And right now, one of my clients is in a unique situation in the safety realm, and I'm shifting away from some of the training to more of the safety side of things with them, and helping them establish a safety client manager for within their company. I'm kind of filling as the well, I found myself a couple times being an interim safety manager for a company. So you come in on an interim basis to help them and to work out some of the kinks and the folds that are all in there, fight some of the battles for this young guy in advance. And then I'm helping them with the selection process and the mentoring of that new young safety guy that's going to come in and lead that company on in the future. I tell people I come in to equip you to where you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't found that happen yet, but that's the idea.
Work myself out of a job. I mean, that's the idea, right? Teach you how to go fishing on your own. Listen, we're talking about a lot of things. There's two things that come to mind before we bail. One is, so I'm clear, let me get it out. One, what is the message to the CEO, that contractor that, protects people, but yet has rock stars everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
And then the second is from a very high level of what you just described, your experience in the industry, becoming that entrepreneur. Now you're invested in the industry. Where does emotional intelligence play out? Because we've been together since the early century, man. You were not always a believer of this soft stuff. So somewhere in your effort to bring technical expertise and safe work practices, you've realized there's something else in there. So talk to me briefly about this owner that has 300,000 a year supervisors and everybody's making bank, employee-owned company, but yet the policies there or not, it's getting undermined
he's going
by
to
the top.
He's going to find that his protecting, like I told you when we spoke earlier about the progressive steps of discipline policy, when you write that out, you have to understand it may not be the worst guy that I have. It may be my best guy, maybe my best friend that I've got to do this to. Well, like I said, the beauty of the plan, the beauty of the progressive steps of discipline plan is I have outs. So I can do something way up here to generate some movement. And when I do it to my best guy, when I do it to my best friend, they know I am damn serious about this safety stuff. I know I am damn serious about the decision that this is moving forward on. Yes.
And if we get to that fifth step,
mm-hmm.
it's a hard lump to swallow. But I would say to myself, hey, look, are you really my friend after all?
Right.
I mean, with all we've been through, I mean, that's part of what I want to say is like, man, you've got people that have been with you for 30 years that are misbehaving. Isn't the story really, hey, you've been with me for 30 years. You've seen me, what we've gone through. Why are you not helping me adhere to the standard?
The story of my illustration. The gentleman sat across, he knew he was wrong. He knew his mistake. I had laid out, I had very directly communicated the expectation and where he failed to meet the expectation. Okay. And then I brought validity to it with the whole having the kids go kick the bush. Right. So now I have a friend who realizes I'm doing my job. I'm trying to bring about change. The only argument we have between us is the severity. And then you let him know in that, well, you are welcome to grieve this. That is your right. So, and you let him know that. And then as it leaves, I still have to, I'm with the boss. I'm trusting in him. He knows where he's going here. And with my friend. So then as we march along and we got the third step and they gave him the 2 days back, he saw all the fruit. He saw everything about it. If he's truly a friend and he's truly a good guy, worth saving. Now we can give grace. We're doing it here at this end instead of up here at this end. If we'd have done it up here, we'd have lost face. We'd have never instituted change. We'd have never accomplished anything. It would have been retribution. It would not have been edification. But by following the process, even with my best friend or the best guy I got, if I follow that process.
You know, I really think, again, human nature says we focus on what we want. We always focus on what we don't want. So again, for an executive, owner, or leader, focusing on what we want edification.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we adhere good policy, best practice policy, and adhere to it, the outcome, although difficult, emotional,
But does it? And you just look at it. So when you're looking at it, okay, this is my policy. This is what I'm going to do. This is my next step. Always ask your question, but does it edify? Now, edify has a spiritual, spin off to it there, because it is a spiritual statement, but, to encourage, strengthen, and grow. Does this encourage, strengthen, and grow? If it doesn't meet those three standards, I need to pull back and I need to look at it, because that is what we want.
Right. Good. This is good. All right. So I have that other question. We're going to come back to you. I had another one pop up. So, this whole concept of human performance, and there's these handbooks, which is really just a depository of, again, it's not a safety. It's not OSHA saying what we did wrong, let's write another policy. Human performance is, hey, what have we been doing right all these years? And let's put it into that book. So I'm referring to the human performance. I sat in a leadership. I was one of the speakers. The keynote, I'm going to drop a name here, was Todd Conklin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, have you heard of that name?
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of Todd? Okay.
Yes.
Unbeknown to me, in one of the most recent up in our content, I have the course, Big in Electric Utility, Tactical EQ for Electric Utilities. I updated, not knowing I was quoting Todd. I knew I was quoting Todd on human performance, but I didn't know I was going to a conference where he was a keynote speaker and I was going to be sitting in his audience. And I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is the guy. And so I think the world of Todd. And if you have a chance to listen to him, again, comedian, got a lot of humor, but like yourself, 30 years of experience working at the laboratory. And one of his takeaways, because I had many, and we've talked about it, accountability and responsibility. And I just want to throw this out to ping with you a little bit, just get your thoughts on it. Now, I want to say first and foremost, accountability is in fact a leadership skill under the EQ competency model, right? There's a behavior associated. Here's what it looks like when it's done right. Here's what it looked like when it's done wrong. So you have the incident. On which side? Here's what he said, because it became a debate. Accountability is on the front for the bang. There's a bang. Now we're holding people responsible. And again, there's a way. It's not to reprimand or to retribution. It is to learn and to edify and grow. But how interesting is that? Accountability, if done proper, reduces the error likely situation. We could potentially avoid the bang if we learn that emotional intelligence skill on accountability. Thoughts on that? Accountability before, responsibility after?
Well, there's consequences of every decision. And if I'm a responsible individual, if I'm accountable for others and for my actions and the actions of others, I'm going to lead them with the idea that I'm accountable. It all stops here. So then when something goes wrong, if I escape and evade and duck and jive, to get away from my responsibility, again, bad leadership, bad everything, right? Consequences are going to be there. But if I'm accountable and I accept my accountability, I recognize my accountability to myself and to others, and then something goes wrong, I should be at the end. My responsibility should be what went wrong and why. How do I push
prevent it? Yeah.
How to prevent it going forward? Because I'm accountable. So now I have a responsibility to go, ooh, Now, the same thing as we talked about with the audit process. You can't write a policy, you can't write a rule and not have an audit process. And then after the audit process, you have to have, what am I fixing here? What I learned in the audit process is telling me whether the steps are in wrong sequence, I'm using the wrong equipment, whatever it might be, or is it personal behavior?
Mm-hmm.
Is the personal behavior an issue where he did not know his expectations? That's why we have
That's back to a training procedure.
That's why we have that respect part up front, because I'm coming in and I'm going to show you with
Right.
clear and defined expectations of what we want from you going forward. Right. And that's respectful. That's nice. That's just, me talking to you. It's, you don't want to get into, it's me treating you like a man with respect. How you'd expect to be treated.
That's a separate podcast because that get lost today. Seriously, I mean, that is another podcast. Again, I think, and what comes to my chatter is we're dealing with a generation of young men and women that perhaps had some lack in the family. We don't need to go there. And yet here they are in leadership positions and they don't have it. They don't have that tool yet. That hasn't been refined there on how to respect, right? If their supervisor, boss, parent, guardian, chopping them at the knees every day, you're in survival mode. This is far deeper on the psychology of things than we want to get into. So another podcast.
Even as I told you, when I go to do evaluations, so I'm going to evaluate the technical skill and knowledge of a pool of journeymen at a particular company. And there's a long, lengthy knowledge test. Questions get asked multiple times in different ways. And then after that test, I grade that test. And then there's an outside field skill assessment where there's 8 stations they got to go through. And whatever question lands within a particular station, I write on that man's document what he missed on the test. So then when we get out into the field and we're talking in the field and he's doing his job, I can ask him these questions again in the field where he's doing what he loves to do. Either he shows it to me with his hands perfectly, explains it to me as he's doing it along the way, and I can then take a pencil, I can draw a line through that missed question. He knows it. He's just not good at taking tests. But when I go to do that, day one, the first half of day one, I get all these senior guys back in the corner.
I get it.
And the true winnow is when they realize my purpose there is to make them better.
Edify.
That paradigm happens when that epiphany hits them that he is truly here, not to hurt me, but to help me.
Right.
Body language changes.
I get it, brother.
Older guys are listening to me better because the older guys, their whole body language has shifted. And I be there by lunch on when I'm doing those evals, and it's just through true, sincere communication. You can tease and play with them a little bit, but you got a standard, and you're bringing them to the standard. You're not bringing the standard to them, and that gains respect.
I got to chat. You are emotionally intelligent, so things you're telling people to do.
My wife wouldn't tell you that.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to suggest to you, again, you were not achieved and done. I give you the assessment. Will it be your proficiency? I'm confident you're going to have blues and greens everywhere. That said, when we say to somebody, just do this, if they don't have the tools, and again, a lot of times that it goes down to that EI stuff. Now, let me ask you a question. What happened with Tim? When did you start to see that emotional intelligence is a part of the work?
I first read the book. Goodness gracious. I was still with Simpson. That was working for Ron when he had me read it, working with emotional intelligence. That opened my eyes quite a bit. And then back then I was still on that fence of a discussion of, is it either naturally within somebody or can it be taught? So that was the next level with it. But then when I went to Florida Power as a lineman and then left as a lineman to become into that regional resource foreman position, and I saw how a true change leader comes in and brings about that change in a very positive way. Now, are there negatives to it? Yes. Anytime you're modifying somebody's behavior, there's going to be emotions involved. So we're trying to get the emotions out of it. And so that, again, so that people are encouraged, strengthened, and grow. Everything I do with my employees is so that they can be encouraged, strengthened, and grow. Why do we allow a policy or a procedure that does not meet that standard? So as you start looking at, and like I said, I lived through it while I was there at Progress, and saw that change and how well it worked. But again, the other thing I learned within it, to your point about the guy at the top, if that guy at the top is not practicing emotional intelligence and he is protecting people and doing things like that, you're going to be you're beating your head against the wall, because every time you try to get something going and you try to get a lesson learned, every time he shortcuts that lesson on somebody or prevents somebody from going through that lesson because he favors them, it lets everybody at the company know it's really not that important. If it was, I mean, mowing the grass, I cut grass in shorts and flip-flops my entire life until my son turned 11 and was coming out to help me cut grass. Then I made sure that he, because I didn't want him getting tore up ankles from the weed eater. Right. I didn't want him with his toes dangling out there stepping on stuff. Right. So I made sure he had on a pair of work boots and had blue jeans on. Right. So again, and that's my point with emotional intelligence and its impact on safety. When we look at the emotions and how do we make plans, processes, procedures that equip and not be detrimental. Because if I'm not willing to punish my son because he went out there in shorts and flip-flops, of course, he's seen me do that all of his life. But I got to tell him, and I have to communicate to him now the importance of him wearing that. Okay. And the concerns and the dangers that are out there. And that was a huge eye opener for me just on how I behaved around the house, because he's watching me all the time. Right. And so seeing it work when I was there with Progress, seeing where it didn't work at later places in my career because the top had its own agenda. They communicated one agenda to me, but as we started to make progress and stuff, they had their favorites and they wouldn't do these with their favorites. They were overly empathetic. You can get somebody who is empathetic to a thought, he'll destroy a business. You get somebody who plays favorites and he'll destroy a business. And there's a lot of places out there, they make money hand over fist, but they're not making the money they could make. They're not making the impact they could make. They're just luckily in a position to where they're still doing good. But once you realize you're bumping up against this ceiling, and once you realize the cost of these bad decisions, that's my point of the whole interim thing like that. You let some young guy who just graduated from college, got a master's and a CSP, comes to a power company to be the safety guy. Now he's got all the credentials in the world, even credentials that I don't have, but his ability to bring about change without having somebody to direct him and guide him and edify him and back him up. I had a guy pull into a parking spot. He'd done it twice. Third time, I stopped over there, and all three times I stopped and said something to him. This is in a non-BU environment. So I told him, listen, this is the third time. I'm not going to have a fourth time. The fourth time, you're going to be on paper, okay? We need to back this vehicle in. That person left that meeting for me, went in with the boss and complained to the boss he didn't like the way I spoke to him. And the boss called me in there and entertained that whole piece of which that guy was trying to use as a diversion, right? Where if he'd have been a solid boss, he said, wait a minute, did you say you nosed in? Why'd you nose in? Bring it back to the real topic. But you have somebody who's so empathetic, he's so worried about everybody's feelings that he has no backbone. And that just absolutely kills culture.
The and the strength, if one is empathetic, we call it strength. But the rule of thumb is the strength becomes a weakness
When it's
if you
over,
keep it out there for too long. So I don't know if I would use the word empathetic, and then that's a good example, because usually you've got a lack of empathy there. You got too much emotion, but in that scenario. But what a great illustration. Let me bring it up to today. You're now invested. You have clients that have an expectation of you to adhere to a standard that when you leave, these men and women are technically competent, but yet there's an emotional intelligence piece here. So what is the message? If you're in the business of training people to be in the electric utility outside, what you better be training them? What's the message? There's a holistic approach here. There's something else. Because I've heard you say it. I've heard you say frustrated, man. We've invested so much in technology and technique and safety, and we're still having errors.
Well, coming back to this, I hate to be so discipline focused, but whether it be with kids in today's society, you've seen the memes on the thing that says, well, okay, well, now we know that the timeout generation didn't work, Right. So the whole thing is, if I care about it, if it's truly something I care about, I'm going to take action to correct it. If I don't correct it, that means it's not really important to me.
Well said. No, that's just, scriptures say it with few words. You just did.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. If it's important to me, I focus on it. If it's not important to me, I don't focus on it. Now, what gets focused on gets done. The whole phrase, what gets checked gets done. Okay.
Emotional intelligence, though. Emotional intelligence is playing out in this, man.
It is. And it's the whole thing of you have guys, back to the day when Ron first started bringing out the DISC personality profile. And you watch those guys sit in that class, they were always sing Kumbaya. Did you bring us flowers? These kind of comments every single time you teach that class. But as they're done with that class and they're leaving for the night, every one of those men are going to come up to me and ask for a copy of that test so they can take it home to their wives.
Yes.
Because they got through that class and they realized, I'm not listening. I'm listening to her in my own paradigm. I'm not listening to her in her paradigm. And I want her to listen to her from now on in her paradigm. But even more than that, I want her to listen to me in my paradigm. Same, you go to love languages, you go to all these different things. Once you start thinking about all of this space and how much this person's emotions and this person's emotions, you could say the words 15, 30 times. You may report it a dozen times, but they're not a dozen. Saying it more times isn't helping because they're not hearing what you're saying. They're yeah.
To be clear for the audience as we start to wrap this up, personality styles came out in that 70s. It was standardized. It was so good. Most organizations utilize it very minimally. We profile in the beginning, it goes into a file, and we use it no more. To answer your question, in the 90s, when emotional intelligence first came out, that was one of the first questions you hear Dr. Goleman ask was, is personality style, is this emotional intelligence? And the answer was no. Personality style is somewhat of the cloth we're woven from. Keyword patterns.
The emotional intelligence, though, is how I modify myself for him to hear me.
Well, so now emotional intelligence, these are learned.
How then I hear him.
These are skills that give us abilities, what you just said. So learning both is a message. I go around the country speaking. I'm at a local in Philly. It's a stand down. I got 130 outside line. You could see what I'm seeing here, right? Tats, neck down. Right? And we're going to talk about emotional intelligence for the next 45 minutes. By the time we're done, it does get in here where they make sense out of it, but it resonates here where you literally just take the chip. Not if there ever was, but we got a lot of egos. They do a lot of hard work, risky work. They got a right to feel good but confident about themselves. But you could
the line trade is one of those trades that the gift of completion is repetitive and continuous. I complete a task and a job multiple times a day sometimes. There's people that go to work for a year and don't get a sense of completion. So the cockiness and the attitude that comes from repeatedly stepping into the fire, pulling it off, making it happen, and getting a sense of completion that looks good. Get in a truck with a lineman and drive around. All your new apprentices, that guy's gonna drive. I built that pole. I did that pole. I built that pole. Because they're proud, and this sense of completion that they get on a constant basis fortifies that.
I get it. Again, that's a little bit of that personality style that thrives on that environment. So again, so my message, and yours is the same, and I think this is kind of how we're wrapping up. We want to teach personality styles in a day-to-day communication because it improves communication. We want to improve crew EQ, the IQ of line, and what is procedure, what is safe work practice, what is equipment. But we also need to teach EQ. So it's an IQ, EQ when we go to raise these young men and women. And I say that even the old dogs, even some of us, we're looking for these new tricks. We've always had the best practice of what the procedure is, even working storm on a foreign system. There's SOPs in place and we can practice them, and I got to be smart about them. But without EQ, I'm not getting communication. I'm not getting behavioral leadership. I'm not getting corrective actions, no self-checks, no peer checks, no stop works. Those are right off the handbook for human performance. That, my friend, is why I think we continue to see errors. Are we smart? We are smarter. We are IQ more than we've ever been. We're IQ off the chart, but EQ to specific industries and occupations, but just in general, just watch the news, man. Which is why I'm so grateful for you, sir, taking some time on this type of a podcast. We're going to try to make this some kind of a learning module or chunk it up a little bit.
Sounds good.
So we'll have some more conversations.
I'm excited about partnering up and doing some things together and next steps. I think it'll be great.
So give me some time to chew this one up. I had Pat Doring yesterday. Pat's instrumental in creating a crisis negotiation course, and we had a great conversation with him yesterday. I'm gonna dice both of you guys up. Obviously, you're my electric utility space, and I'm gonna work with Pat in my law enforcement space.
Well, you asked a question earlier about EQ and IQ, and how do you in today's environment. I think of police officers and the difficulty that they have within their jobs. I don't know if I would do that job for that money anymore. But to pull up to a call where women and or children are being abused by a boyfriend or something like that, to come in there where she's high on emotion, he's high on emotion, and there's all these emotions. The kids are screaming, somebody's bleeding. There's all this nonsense. And to come in there and be the one who's in control of the emotions in the room, who has this emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence to lower and control and de-escalate that situation, and not just walk in there, kick him in the nuts, punch him in the face, handcuff him, and throw him in the back of the car. You know what I'm saying? That's got to be a battle beyond battles.
Well, that was the old SOP. I have such a privileged position, so blessed. You can imagine, Tim, I get to sit with these SWAT guys, and They're just like us, man. They chose a path and they're loyal to that path. And I got 34-year-old guys. I'm talking with Pete, who's SWAT in Memphis, and he sat in a class and he said, "Man, you're talking about things that make sense to me, but I don't get it." So he knows, but the understanding and the depth is. And so, I mean, we started on 1+1 is 1 on just a
Yeah.
coaching call yesterday, and I did it because this is truly where I get gratified. There's no paycheck in working with cops, I can tell you that, but there's no better place to be. You've been in that position.
Mhm.
You've been in that position in your earlier years. You shared with me.
Mhm.
What was neat to hear Pat say yesterday is he said, let's talk about training. What did our classes in crisis negotiation look like? What do you teach? What is the task-based competency? Do this, do this. That's what most of our training is, task-based. And here's one of the things he said. He said, man, we had to rewrite the SOP. We're talking about SOPs, right? He said, again, the earlier version was you go in there and you just take them away. But he said, we realized, well, first off, I said, well, you went to hostage negotiations to crisis negotiation. I said, let's talk about that. But he goes, one of the things we first realized is that when you show up, you get hot.
Mhm.
And he said, we had to rewrite the procedure. He said, first thing you're doing when you show up in a crisis negotiation is you're befriending. So he goes, the first in the script is, hey man, you've been in there for a little while. Can I get you some water?
Yeah.
Do you need anything?
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally from the emotional intelligence perspective, de-escalates.
Mhm.
But again, what were we teaching? We realized we got to rewrite that. We got to change that step rather than coming in, we're going to end this now. It's more of, hey man, you've been in there a while. And that's something.
Mhm.
Rewrote the training curriculum, which was so fascinating.
Yep. Most definitely.
So
Good
again,
stuff.
you've had it for a long time, and you've gotten it through your experiences, maybe your parenting as a father. Certainly
Mhm.
those early years, there's always a spiritual conversation to this. You know that. When
Mhm.
you talk about taking your thoughts captive or renewing them often,
Mhm.
um, that's this. So, any closing words, friend, as we wrap this up?
Let's do it again.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, let me pepper this one a little bit and just have some fun with it. Yet again, I'm always thinking from a learning perspective, right? There's
Yeah.
entertainment value, but there's learning value too. So I'm going to approach it as I dice this up and start reviewing it. I'm going to approach it from that perspective. How can we put little knowledge nuggets out there?
Sure. Sounds great.
All right, boss, let's keep the line open.
You bet.
You've been listening to the EQ for Life podcast. To learn more about the EQ for Life podcast or Parrish, please contact us online at info@parishowentaylor.com or call 866-487-2815. That's 866-487-2815. If you have personal experience with learning emotional intelligence and would like to be considered as a guest on our EQ